Today, the New York Times released what I consider to be a bombshell, the results of their interviews with both a number of superdelegates as well as leaders in both the state and national Democratic Party, showing that the conversation that's been going on over the past month, the possibility that if Bernie Sanders enters the Democratic National Convention with a plurality but not a majority of delegates, they do indeed think that their job should be, and indeed they will, take the nomination away and give it to one of the people who got less support, less donations, less votes, less delegates, all of it.
Yeah, it's unsurprising. It's something we've thought was gonna happen for a really long time, or something that was hinted at, but the gall of them is still shocking at this point. They're the Democratic Party, but there's nothing democratic about them. And what this does is only further bolster Trump's claim that he's the one to drain the swamp, because what seems swampier than taking away the candidate who won the most votes and installing your own centrist who will inevitably lose to Trump, because that narrative only reinforces everything he ran on in 2016.
Exactly, and look, we've been talking about what this would mean if they attempt to do this. That is referenced in this New York Times article. I love the wording that they use for it. So they say dozens of interviews, Democratic establishment leaders this week show that they're not just worried about Mr. Sanders' candidacy, but are also willing to risk intra-party damage to stop his nomination at the convention in July if they get the chance. Risk intra-party damage, that's all it is. It'll be some damage if the person potentially, look, yes, could it be a 1% difference between him and number 2? It could be. It could also be that he has 49% of the vote. And if that's the case, there would be intra-party damage if they were to, like I've been saying all week, give the middle finger to literally millions of voters and say that whole thing that we just went through, all those primaries, all those caucuses, wasn't that fun? Didn't mean anything though. We're gonna take it, we're gonna give it to Klobuchar or Buttigieg or God only knows who. And we've got some names that popped up in this article that are gonna be a real trip.
Well, I would argue that perhaps, well, it's just insane that they're considering doing this, but you get into it and then I'll make my point.
Sure, so look, they talked to 93 party officials. All of them are superdelegates who could have a say on the nominee at the convention. They found overwhelming opposition to handing him the nomination that he will have the most delegates towards if he arrived with the most delegates but fell short of a majority, which is still, it's possible. It's, I don't know if it's a 30% chance, a 40% chance, but there is certainly a chance that could happen. Only 9 of the 93 they interviewed said that Mr. Sanders should become the nominee purely on the basis of arriving at the convention with a plurality if he was short of a majority. Now understand, less than 10% of those that they talked to said that he should get it, even though literally every single time that the superdelegates have gotten involved, they have given their support to the person with the most delegates. Doesn't matter, plurality, majority, the person who had the most, they always supported. Now, suddenly, that is so extreme an idea to do that, to continue to do what you've always done, that they're going to finally flip on that, and only 10% think that that's how they should act.
Yeah, and their whole argument is that it's about who would defeat Donald Trump. It is so obvious that that's not your primary concern, because Bernie Sanders polls better in all of the states that you need to defeat Donald Trump than the other candidates that you're trying to prop up. It's so obvious that they are honestly willing to maybe destroy their own party, press self-destruct on their robot bodies, and just completely end the party rather than have Bernie Sanders be the nominee, because he's that threatening to the very interests and institutions of the people that are in that party, right? So the consultant culture, the constant handouts, the contracts given to people, the fact that these people are employed. The reason they're so freaked out by this is because they've done a terrible job. They lost 1,000 seats under President Obama and have they lost to Trump, obviously. And so Bernie Sanders, they know when he comes, if he were to win and be the nominee, he'd clean house, and it would represent a fundamental shift in everything they've come to know, in their employment status, in all of their friends. And so that's why it scares them so much. So let's not pretend this is about defeating Donald Trump. You are pretty much people who are overseeing this democratic process, who are trying to manipulate it so it helps you out and your employment out, as opposed to the country. It's sick.
Yeah, look, we've got to get to these quotes, but I just want to say, you know what I haven't seen? I haven't seen like a DNC official on MSNBC or, even one of the centrists, like let's say Klobuchar or Buttigieg, they all say, we need someone who can beat Donald Trump. You know what they never do after that? Pull out the head-to-head polls with Donald Trump and show that they're the one to do it. Or if you're like a pundit and you're afraid, Sanders won't be able to do it, we need someone who can beat him. They never say, and here's all the evidence that he's not the guy. They never do that. Do you think it's because they fundamentally don't think that the evidence is valid, or is it just because it's inconvenient to what they're saying? I saw a poll today, head to head, Dem candidates, all of them versus Trump in Pennsylvania. Seems like an important state, maybe we should win it. You know who has the best chance against Trump? You're not surprised, it's Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
You know how significant it is? He's literally the only one beating Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. All of the other Democrats are losing in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, one of the states that lost Hillary Clinton the election because it flipped, it was very close. And even Bernie Sanders is only up by a few points. The others are all down. So when they talk about electability, they don't give a damn about the chances. They care about their chances, to your point, of staying gainfully employed under a Democratic nominee that's gonna run, give them money, and then lose.
Yeah. Let's get to the people who are willing to speak on the record to the New York Times, because that's how cozy they feel in their powerful positions, that they'd be willing to put their names to this crap.
Exactly. Jay Jacobs, New York State Democratic Party chairman and a superdelegate, said that superdelegates should choose a nominee they believed had the best chance of defeating Mr. Trump if no candidate wins the majority of delegates during the primaries. He then whipped out a fat stack of polls. No, sorry, he didn't do that, but he did bring it up. And let's see, Representative Jim Himes, also superdelegate, says, we're way past the day where party leaders can determine an outcome here. But I think there's a vibrant conversation about whether there's anything that can be done.
That's a heavy butt. That's a heavy butt.
That's a very heavy butt.
That's a thick butt.
Whether there's anything that can be done. That's how you talk about hurricanes, viruses. Is there anything that can be done? Come on, let's have a vibrant conversation. Let's have a vibrant conversation about what it means to live in a democracy. How about that? Can we have that, Representative Himes?
Oh, unless it's characterized as a republic.
Exactly, well, we're gonna get to that.
I'm teeing you up so well.
You are, we're like 2 off from that. But yes, Representative Steve Cohen of Tennessee said, if you could get to a nomination and pick Sherrod Brown, that would be wonderful.
Not running.
But he's not running. But that's more like a novel. Yeah, maybe a fictional novel in which he is running. Donald Trump's presidency is like a horror story. So if you can have a horror story, you might as well have a novel. Why don't we have a romance at this point, honestly? Sherrod Brown is not running. And do you know how many people have called out at the injustice that they don't get to vote for Sherrod Brown? I don't know if there are any.
Zero?
Well, him, presumably.
You know what this isn't? It's not a story of any kind, it's just real life. So perhaps we could behave within the confines of reality. I don't really know Steve Cohen, who I've met, by the way. Pretty nice guy, but
you talk about novels all the time?
I just the amount of people in the Democratic establishment who think this is an acceptable point of view, it's just shocking to me. I know it shouldn't be shocking at this point, but still, like, could you, 93.
93.
93.
It's a lot. Yeah, okay, so Representative Don Baer of Virginia says, at some point you could imagine saying, let's go get Mark Warner, Chris Coons, Nancy Pelosi, somebody that could win, and we could all get behind and celebrate.
Oh, Nancy Pelosi, she has like a bottom floor single digit approval rating. I mean, it's not that low, but it's certainly one of the lowest of elected officials in the country.
I mean, I think she
dumb person.
You don't think she could pick off some moderate Republicans to vote for Nancy Pelosi?
All your friends like Pelosi, no one in the country likes Pelosi, and Bernie Sanders has one of the highest popularity, favorability ratings of any politician. Get out of Washington, go into the real world. It's maddening.
Yeah. I try not to, but I do read about what happens there at least. Okay, so there are other names being floated. Honestly, if it's a novel, let's just put up like Gollum or something. Like that would make a good story. Okay, William Owen, Tennessee DNC member says, Michelle Obama's the only person I can think of who can unify the party and help us win.
Oh my God.
This election is about saving the American experiment as a republic. It's also about saving the world. This is not an ordinary election. Notice he said saving the American experiment as a republic, not saving it as a democracy.
Certainly.
He's a Democrat, he's more interested in the republic part at that point.
Save the republic, save the world.
Exactly.
Install Michelle Obama, who is
Not
never
running?
been a politician in her life.
I like her.
She's
great.
Too. She's great.
I
love working out.
Exactly.
I mean, not that much. I don't know. I'm losing my mind.
That is a possibility. Now, let's just add a little bit of context to that last one. We haven't been delving too much into any of these individuals, but William Owen is Tennessee DNC member. Also, according to, I believe it was Lee Fang at The Intercept, runs a lobbying firm called Asset and Equity Corporations, who has donated to Senators Mike Rounds, Dan Sullivan. Those are both Republicans, by the way, and gave $8,500 to a joint fundraising committee designed to benefit Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
I'm so
But thank God he's giving us his opinion on who should be the Democratic nominee.
It's not just an opinion.
Yeah.
It's something that could
He has
affect
power.
things. 93 who spoke to the New York Times. Can you imagine how many more who didn't speak to the New York Times?
By the way, and so we're going to talk a little bit more later on about superdelegates and how they used to vote, how they're voting now. A little bit of context for that because they're talking to superdelegates. He worked in 2018 to block a Sanders-backed plan to weaken the role of superdelegates in the nomination process. He said at the time, according to Politico, if we don't have a vote, then what good are we? Well, you got money. You can give it to Mitch McConnell. You still got that. That's what you got. So let's add a little bit more. Don't break your pen.
Sorry.
Representative Veronica Escobar, Democrat of Texas, added that she would not support Sanders even if he enters the convention with 40% of the pledged delegates, saying, if 60% is not with Bernie Sanders, I think that says something. I really do. I mean, one thing it might say is that we still have like 9 or 10 people running for the presidency, even though the vast majority of them know they don't have, a chance in hell of actually winning. It could mean that maybe.
I hope Klobuchar stays in until November. So, I mean, seriously, stay in, everybody. Make sure that you're splitting up that moderate vote so that the undemocratic hacks at the Democratic National Committee are unable to actually pull this off. Because this is scary. This is not a joke, no longer a drill. The Bernie Sanders, the ability for the Democratic National Committee to actually sabotage Bernie Sanders in a way that would be I would say it wouldn't be unprecedented, but they kind of did it in 2016. But this would be a whole nother level.
Yeah.
I'd say there are two scenarios and they could both happen, right? They strip Bernie Sanders of the nomination if he gets the plurality of delegates, if he gets the most amount of all of the other candidates, and they give it to someone else, or if they give it to Bloomberg. And both of those scenarios mean the end of the Democratic Party, I think, as we know it. I don't know.
Imagine. Well, first of all, we'll talk about Sanders supporters. Imagine like all you've done. Imagine donating to a candidate, having it taken away. Imagine you went and you canvassed, you knocked on doors, you made phone calls, you talked to your family and friends about him, and then they take it away. Imagine if you're one of his, by the end of this process, literally millions and millions of voters who are enthusiastic in support of him, to have it taken away. And honestly, look, that's the most obvious example that the most supported candidate in this hypothetical and his supporters will be robbed of this. But if you're a supporter, let's say Elizabeth Warren. Let's say you support Elizabeth Warren. You donated to her, you canvassed for her, all of that. And in the end, they give it to Bloomberg. So look, they didn't specifically rob Elizabeth Warren, but they did imply that all of that was just fun and games, all that stuff about democracy and the primaries and the caucuses. Remember how we got so worked up about it, and in the end, it meant absolutely nothing? How much faith would you have in that party? If you were literally the supporter of anyone other than the loser they pluck from obscurity to hand the nominee to, why would you ever trust this party again?
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.